From a team completely missing their turn to a leaked draft night video of a player smoking marijuana out of a gas mask, these are the 10 craziest NFL draft moments ever. Our countdown starts back in 1994 when the NFL draft turned into a media showdown as ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. ripped the Colts for picking Nebraska linebacker Trev Alberts instead of Trent Dilfer.
Here's a team that needed a franchise quarterback to pass up a Trent Dilfer when all you have is Jim Harbaugh. Give me a break.
Word quickly reached Colts general manager Bill Tobin, who was preparing for an interview with ESPN's Chris Mortensen. As the cameras turned to Tobin, viewers witnessed one of the most savage responses in sports television history.
He's never ever put on a jockstrap. He's never been a coach. He's never been a scout. He's never been an administrator. And all of a sudden, he's an expert. He's in our papers 2 days ago telling us who we have to take.
Tobin wasn't finished. His voice rising with each statement, he continued.
Mel Kiper has no more credentials to do what he's doing than my neighbor, and my neighbor's a postman, and he doesn't even have season tickets to the NFL.
Kiper took the hit in stride and only became more influential. As for Tobin, his Colts tenure ended shortly after. But while the Colts ignored an analyst criticism and stood by their pick, one coach in 1999 took the opposite approach. He sold out everything for one player he believed was a guaranteed superstar. In 1999, the New Orleans Saints did not just gamble on one player. They gave up their entire draft picks because Mike Ditka believed Ricky Williams was the key to everything. Entering his third season after back-to-back 6-10 records, Ditka was desperate. He saw Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner from Texas, as the answer. So he made it clear before the draft that he was willing to do whatever it took to get him, even if it meant giving up his entire draft. Most assumed he was exaggerating. After all, no team would actually trade away an entire draft for one player, but on draft day, that's exactly what happened. The Saints gave up every pick they had in 1999, plus their first and third round picks in 2000. That's 8 total selections just to move up from 12th to 5th overall. Ditka did not just bet his future on Williams, but he also embraced the hype. In a now infamous ESPN The Magazine photo shoot, he posed as a groom while Williams wore a wedding dress. "We are going to win the Super Bowl," he said. "We got Ricky, and he's the final piece to the puzzle. I really believe that." It was the perfect symbol of how much Ditka had tied his future to the rookie running back. But the honeymoon did not last long. Williams battled injuries as a rookie and finished with 884 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, while the Saints collapsed to 3-13. By the end of the season, Ditka, general manager Bill Kuharick, and the coaching staff were fired. But while Williams' story shows how one draft decision can derail a coach's career, the NFL draft has also produced moments of triumph that transcend the game itself. In 2018, Shaquem Griffin made history as the first one-handed player drafted in modern NFL era, proving that no obstacles is too big to overcome. Born with amniotic band syndrome, he suffered severe pain in his left hand. At age 4, doctors amputated it. He and his twin brother, Shaquille, always promised that they would stick together, even in their football careers. That promise was put to the test when Shaquille was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in 2017, while Shaquem stayed at UCF. At the 2018 NFL Combine, Griffin stole the show. He bench pressed 225 pounds 20 times using a prosthetic attachment, then ran a blistering 4.38 in the 40-yard dash, which was the fastest by a linebacker since electronic timing began. But as the draft stretched into its third day, he was still waiting for his name to be called. Then it finally happened. Griffin's draft call was what these moments are all about. Pure joy when a lifetime of hard work finally pays off. But let's face it, draft day emotions can be complicated. Not always what they seem on TV. Take 2005 when the Bears picked Cedric Benson 4th overall. The camera zoomed in as Benson broke down crying, and everyone thought he was overwhelmed with happiness. Truth is, those tears were actually from anger. Before the draft, Benson and his team had sent a clear message to the Bears: "Don't draft me." Unable to agree on contract terms, he explicitly warned Chicago to pass on him. They didn't listen. The drama didn't end there. Benson held out for over a month before finally signing a 5-year, $35 million deal. By then, he'd missed all the training camp, which led to Thomas Jones being named the starter. Even worse, his teammates were reportedly so upset with his holdout that some of them tried to injure him during practice. 17 years later, the draft produced a story that couldn't have been more different. The San Francisco 49ers made their very last pick of the 2022 NFL Draft. Hardly anyone paid attention. The annual Mr. Irrelevant selection typically gets more laughs and respect. After all, the final player chosen each year receives joke gifts like a Lozman Trophy, which is the opposite of the Heisman. But this time, the overlooked pick turned out to be anything but irrelevant. Brock Purdy had been a good quarterback at Iowa State, throwing over 12,000 yards in college. But NFL scouts saw him as too small at 6'1" and lacking arm strength. One draft report even called him a long-term backup type of guy. Then, football happened. Trey Lance broke an ankle in Week 2, and Jimmy Garoppolo took over and played well until Week 13 when he broke his foot against the Dolphins. Suddenly, the final pick in the draft was the 49ers' only option. What happened next shocked the football world. Purdy threw for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win over Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. After surgery and months of rehab from an elbow injury suffered in the playoffs, Purdy came back stronger in 2023. He threw for over 4,200 yards and 31 touchdowns, and he led the 49ers to the Super Bowl against Kansas City. But while Purdy's rise from Mr. Irrelevant to Super Bowl quarterback is the ultimate draft day success story, Laremy Tunsil's experience in 2016 was the exact opposite. It was one of the most infamous draft day disasters in recent memory. Many experts had Tunsil projected as a top 5 pick, with some even suggesting he could go first overall before the Tennessee Titans traded the pick. Even after that trade, few expected Tunsil to fall outside the top 5 or 7 selections, but about 10 minutes before the draft began, disaster struck. A video appeared on Tunsil's verified Twitter account showing him smoking marijuana through a gas mask bong. The timing couldn't have been worse. Teams were making final decisions as the scandal erupted live on social media. As the first round unfolded, the cameras kept cutting to Tunsil in the green room. You could see the stress on his face as he sat with family members. With each pick that passed, millions of dollars vanished from his rookie contract. The Miami Dolphins finally selected Tunsil with the 13th overall pick after he fell several spots from his expected range. But the drama wasn't over, as his Instagram account was hacked after he drafted, and screenshot appeared to show him asking Ole Miss coaches for money to pay his mother's bills, which was a potential NCAA violation. At his post-selection press conference, visibly shaken, Tunsil admitted that was me in the video, but also insisted his account had been hacked. When asked about the Instagram post, he confirmed that he had accepted money from an Ole Miss coach. But while Tunsil's fall came from social media chaos, not every draft day disaster is caused by a public scandal. But real quick, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on exciting NFL content added weekly. Now, back to the list. Sometimes all it takes is just a simple miscommunication to derail a team's plans. In 1982, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers managed to draft a player they never wanted because they couldn't hear properly on a phone call. When draft day arrived, the Bucs held the 17th overall pick. The front office was split between 2 players, Penn State guard Sean Farrell and Bethune-Cookman defensive end Booker Reese. After much debate, they decided on Reese. As their pick time was running out, Bucs personal director Ken Herrick made the call to Marcusio. The room in Tampa was noisy. The connection was bad. Herrick told him, "Listen, Pat, you've got 2 names there. We're not going with Sean Farrell. We're going with Booker Reese. Turn it in." But in the noise and confusion, Marcusio only caught part of the message. He heard Sean Farrell and quickly wrote the name on the draft card. Minutes later, when Commissioner Pete Rozelle announced with the 17th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Sean Farrell, guard, Penn State, the Bucs' war room erupted in shock. Still desperate to get Reese, Tampa made a panic move. They traded their first-round pick in 1983 draft to Chicago for a second-round pick that year, which they used on Reese. The mistake hurt twice. First, they drafted someone they didn't want. Then, they gave up a valuable 1983 first-round pick to fix their error. What makes it worse is that Farrell actually turned out to be a solid player, while Reese lasted just 2 disappointing seasons, recording only 2 sacks before being traded. Tampa's draft blunder was bad, but the following year, another team faced a draft day disaster of a different kind. one that involved a future Hall of Fame quarterback refusing to play for them. The Baltimore Colts held the top pick in what would have become the greatest quarterback draft in history. They wanted Stanford's John Elway, a 6'3" quarterback with a cannon arm who could throw a football 70 yards. But 6 weeks before the draft, Elway and his agent dropped the bombshell that shook the NFL. They announced that if the Colts drafted him, then he would never play for them. This wasn't an empty threat because Elway had leverage that most football players didn't. He was also a baseball star who had been talking to Yankees owner George Steinbrenner about a contract that would average $500,000 a year. The Colts ignored the warning, but Elway stood firm, telling reporters, "I don't want to be a jerk, but I told Mr. Cush, you've been offered 3 ones, first-round picks, and a quarterback, and now you have nothing." Then I hung up. 6 days later, the Colts gave in. They traded Elway to the Denver Broncos for quarterback Mark Herman, offensive tackle Chris Hinton, and Denver's first-round pick in 1984. The gamble paid off for both sides. Elway became a Broncos legend, winning 2 Super Bowls and making the Hall of Fame. The Colts gave value for a player who was never going to suit up for them, and from that moment on, top prospects knew they had the power over their NFL destinies. Meanwhile, in 2003, the Minnesota Vikings gave us the answer to what might happen if a team just didn't pick anyone when it was their turn. Holding the 7th overall pick, the Vikings were engaged in trade discussions with the Baltimore Ravens. They were looking to move back to the 10th spot, but as their 15-minute clock ticked down, confusion took over. The Vikings believed they had a deal in place and, with seconds left, called it into the league. Then they sat back, thinking their work was done. But something was wrong. The trade required confirmation from both teams, and the Ravens had finalized their side of the deal. The Vikings' time expired. Before they could react, the Jacksonville Jaguars wasted no time, immediately making their selection. The Carolina Panthers followed suit, picking offensive tackle Jordan Gross. Finally, the Vikings regrouped and selected defensive tackle Kevin Williams with the 9th pick instead of the 7th. They had dropped 2 spots in just minutes without getting anything in return. But in the end, it might have been a blessing in disguise. Williams became a cornerstone in their defense, making 6 Pro Bowls and missing only 4 games in his first 10 seasons. And finally, the number 1 spot on our countdown goes to the most dramatic power move in draft history. John Elway had already proven that a player could refuse to play for a team, but Eli Manning took it even further. He made it clear that under no circumstances would he suit up for the San Diego Chargers. Eli was football royalty, the younger brother of Peyton, and the clear-cut top pick of the 2004 draft. But just a week before draft day, his father sent a warning to the Chargers. If they picked his son, he would sit out the entire season. The Mannings had concerns about the Chargers organization, from his history of losing to instability in the front office. So, when draft day arrived, tension filled the air. Despite the warning, San Diego called Manning's bluff and took him first overall. What followed was one of the most awkward moments in draft history. Manning slowly walked to the stage, held up a Chargers jersey for photos, and looked miserable doing it. But the drama didn't last long. Just 45 minutes later, the Giants selected Phillip Rivers with the 4th pick. Then, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue stepped to the podium with a game-changing announcement. San Diego walked away with Rivers plus a 3rd-round pick in 2004 and a 1st and 5th rounder in 2005. It was a massive haul that helped them build their roster for years to come. As for Manning, he got exactly what he wanted. He landed in New York, where he played on the biggest stage and cemented his legacy. In the end, both teams walked away with a franchise quarterback who would define their era. So, there you have it. NFL draft isn't just about picking names from a board. It's also where plans fall apart and chaos takes over. What started as a simple team-building exercise has become theater filled with drama, power plays, and career-defining moments. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, stick with us, subscribe to Pro Kickoff, and check out some of our other content right here. Thanks for watching.